The 1930s. As the rest of America slowly collapses, one city in the heart of the nation seems to deny reality itself. On one side, hunger, unemployment, and destruction. On the other, lights, jazz, money, and power. Welcome to Kansas City, Missouri. This is not just the story of a city. It is the story of a time when corruption and progress walked hand in hand. Gangsters, politicians, businessmen, and artists together built a remarkable urban empire whose echoes still remain in history. We have arrived in the dark age of the Great Depression, when the United States was drowning in dust, hunger, and economic collapse. Factories are shutting down. Millions stand in endless food lines while the Dust Bowl storms devastate America's farming regions. People are losing their homes, their land, and even their hope for the future. Yet somehow, in the middle of this catastrophe, one city seems to exist in an entirely different reality. You are not standing in a starving or dying city. You are standing in the geographical heart of America, inside a booming metropolis. Life here has not stopped. It is moving even faster, while the roar of construction machines shakes the city. Concrete mixers churn day and night, and money flows through the streets like a river. Illegal whiskey flows as freely as water here. And the nightlife? Time itself seems meaningless. There are no clocks on the nightclub walls, because nobody cares when the night truly begins or ends. People knew this city by one legendary name. The Paris of the Plains. It was a city that seemed completely disconnected from the brutal reality of the Great Depression. But behind the dazzling lights and wild nights, a dark and dangerous truth was hiding. The entire city was controlled by an invisible political empire, a massive web of power. Its influence stretched through the police, businesses, courts, and every important layer of the city. At the center of that empire stood a man who never ran for office, yet controlled the fate of the entire city alone. His name was Boss Tom Pendergast. Under his rule, Kansas City became an open town, a city where power itself was the real law. The police saw everything, but pretended not to. Gambling halls operated openly across the city. Liquor deals, illegal contracts, and bribes were slowly building an entirely new urban lifestyle. At the same time, the city was experiencing an extraordinary architectural and cultural rebirth. New skyscrapers began reaching into the sky as streets, theaters, clubs, and business districts rapidly transformed. But where was all this money coming from? This empire was fueled by illegal businesses, political control, and endless secret deals. Yet there was no denying it, amid the chaos, Kansas City was forging a legendary identity of its own. Using historical archives, rare newsreels, preserved music records, and New Deal architectural plans, we reconstructed that lost era. That moment, when Kansas City was no longer just a city, it became one of America's most mysterious, vibrant, and culturally explosive places. The sun has not fully risen yet, but Kansas City is already awake. With heavy heat, roaring industry, and strange excitement, the city seems alive even before dawn. Today we enter deep into Kansas City, a place where labor, power, jazz, and corruption existed side by side. We will walk through the dark industrial district of West Bottoms, where the city's economy roared day and night. We will feel the rhythm of thousands of garment workers and the relentless speed of industrial life. And when night falls, we will enter the smoke-filled jazz clubs where a new musical history was being born. Welcome to the undisputed capital of the American Midwest. Welcome to Kansas City, 1936. This is not just a city, it is a living 24-hour experience. The day begins at 5 a.m. You wake up in a working-class neighborhood overlooking the Missouri River. Small wooden houses, narrow streets, and silent exhausted mornings reveal the struggle for survival everywhere. The moment you wake up, you realize this day is far from normal. The air feels unnaturally heavy, and the heat seems to push through the walls into your body. Small wooden houses, narrow streets, and silent exhausted mornings reveal the struggle for survival everywhere. The moment you wake up, you realize this day is far from normal. The air feels unnaturally heavy, and the heat seems to push through the walls into your body. You slowly descend the steep winding stairs toward West Bottoms. This is the massive industrial district at the meeting point of the Kansas and Missouri rivers, the true heartbeat of the city's economy. But even before arriving, you begin to feel the presence of the place. First comes the smell. Wet earth, animal manure, smoke, and sweat make the air almost unbearable. This is not just a bad smell, it is the smell of the city's economy. Kansas City's prosperity was built upon this harsh reality. You are now standing in front of the Kansas City stockyards. Before you stretches a massive maze of wooden pens, elevated walkways, and narrow pathways covering hundreds of acres. The sounds of thousands of cattle, hogs, and sheep combine into a deafening roar. Millions of dollars in business are created here every day. This is where the city's true power was built. Millions of animals were processed in Kansas City every year. Only Chicago's legendary Union stockyards were larger in all of America. But this place was more than an industrial district. It was the heartbeat of Kansas City. Like a giant machine, it operated day and night, and the entire city's empire was built on its noise, smell, and labor. The deeper you move into West Bottoms, the heavier and more intense the sounds become. The entire area feels like an industrial battlefield where every sound announces power and chaos. The harsh cries of livestock, shouting drovers, and crashing freight cars blend into endless noise. The sharp whistles of railroad workers cut through the air. Silence does not exist here. The city's economy breathes through noise, constant, tireless, and ruthless. In the distance, steam locomotives push into the stockyards, releasing thick clouds of black smoke. Trainloads of livestock arrive from Texas, Oklahoma, and the vast western plains. Dust rises beneath iron wheels while the smell of coal thickens the air. The entire district feels like a living machine built from metal, sweat, and raw power. You watch thousands of workers slowly moving toward the packing houses. Exhaustion covers their faces, and sleepless nights are visible in their eyes. Among the crowd are European immigrants, African American workers, and people ruined by the Great Depression. They have all come here with one final hope: to find work and a chance to survive. They all share the same destination, the city's brutal slaughterhouses. The work inside is brutal. The factories burn with suffocating heat, filled with the smell of blood, sweat, and death. The workers' bodies break down, but production never stops. Because the profits in this business were enormous, and those profits kept the entire city alive. Below, workers labor through blood and sweat, while above them wealthy tycoons calculate millions inside the Kansas City Livestock Exchange building. They remain completely separated from the heat, chaos, and death below. From their high office windows, they see only numbers, never human lives. As the morning moves forward, the city grows louder, faster, and more alive. At 8 a.m., you leave West Bottoms and begin climbing up the 12th Street incline. The heavy smells and industrial roar slowly fade behind you. Ahead of you, another side of Kansas City begins to appear, a fast-moving modern urban world. You step aboard an electric streetcar operated by the Kansas City Public Service Company. The bright yellow and cream-colored streetcar glides smoothly through the city. In the 1930s, Kansas City's streetcar system was considered one of the finest transit networks in America. More than 300 miles of track connected downtown to the sprawling suburbs. Workers head to jobs, businessmen rush to offices, and shift changes continue as the electric network keeps the city moving. Outside the streetcar window, the city rapidly transforms. The smoky industrial world gives way to towering buildings, busy shops, and crowded commercial streets. Finally, you step off at the corner of 8th Street and Broadway. You are now standing inside Kansas City's famous garment district. Here, thread, fabric, and sewing machines were shaping the future of American fashion. The moment you step into the garment district, you realize this is far more than just an industrial zone. It feels like a giant living machine powered by the labor of thousands of people. This is where the future of America's clothing industry was being created. In 1936, more than 25% of all clothing worn in the United States was produced in this single district. Imagine it, just a few busy streets in Kansas City controlled a massive portion of the nation's fashion industry. Kansas City ranked second only to New York City in clothing production. That is why the entire district buzzed with non-stop activity from morning until night. The massive multi-story brick buildings around you feel like giant living factories. The endless mechanical sound of sewing machines pours out through the open windows. Thousands of needles rise and fall in perfect rhythm, as if the entire district breathes together. The entire building seems to vibrate with fabric, machinery, and motion. Looking through the large glass windows, you see the section system operating at full speed inside the factories. There was a time when a single skilled tailor would create an entire suit from beginning to end. But that era is gone. Now speed and mass production define the industry. Now each worker creates only a small part of a garment instead of the entire piece. Some spend all day sewing collars, while others make only shirt cuffs. Others attach buttons for hours without stopping. This was the age of the assembly line, where speed became the driving force of production. Mass output mattered more here than individual craftsmanship. At the center of this industrial empire stood one name, the Donnelly Garment Company. Founder Nell Donnelly Reed was not just a businesswoman, she helped transform the entire clothing industry. Her Nellie Dawn dress became a new symbol of modern life for middle-class women. The dresses were affordable, elegant, and remarkably high quality. For the first time, ordinary housewives could wear clothing once available only to the wealthy. That is why Kansas City's factories continued operating even during the Great Depression. While other cities lost jobs, thousands of women here still came to work every day. They earned wages, and the clothes they made spread across the American West. But as the day continued, another thing rose dangerously higher, the temperature. By midday, the August sun felt as if it were pouring fire over the city. The air above the streets shimmers while the window glass burns beneath the heat. Inside the factories, machine heat and crowded workers make the conditions unbearable. On that day in 1936, temperatures climbed to 113 degrees Fahrenheit. It was part of one of the deadliest heat waves in North American history. Modern air conditioning did not yet exist the way it does today. As afternoon approaches, the heat in Kansas City becomes even more terrifying. The sun feels like a massive blanket of fire covering the entire city. The black asphalt beneath your leather shoes begins to soften in the heat. With every step, it feels as though your shoes are sticking to the ground. The hot air is so heavy that even breathing becomes difficult. People are no longer just working, they are fighting to survive. Exhausted people sit beside the streets searching desperately for shade and cooler air. Children splash water onto their faces while others walk with wet towels wrapped around their heads. Everyone is trying to lower their body temperature just to stay alive. At that moment, a Salvation Army truck slowly moves through the street. Massive blocks of ice are stacked in the back of the truck. People called this ice, penny ice. The ice was sold to the poor for just 1 cent per pound. For many people, this ice was the final difference between life and death. People wrap ice in cloth and press it against their necks to cool their bodies. Others wrap wet cloth around the burning steering wheels of their Ford V 8S while driving. Yet incredibly, even this brutal heat wave could not stop Kansas City. The city remains busy with construction as new buildings continue rising toward the sky. And it is here that the true face of Kansas City slowly begins to reveal itself. Behind the massive construction, development, and thousands of jobs stood one man. His name was Tom Pendergast. The people of the city saw him as more than just a political leader. To some he was a savior, while to others he was a terrifying shadow ruler. The rules of his political machine were simple, yet ruthlessly effective. Any contractor seeking major city projects had to buy concrete from Tom's company. No one dared to break this rule. But in return, Tom gave the people of the city one thing: jobs. Thousands of working-class people found employment through his projects. Even during the Great Depression, many Kansas City families were still able to put food on the table. Because construction in the city never stopped. Roads were built and buildings kept rising. People had work, and the city itself kept moving forward. That is why many ordinary citizens saw Tom Pendergast as more than just a corrupt politician. To them, he was the man who made sure their children did not starve. But even this help came with a price. In exchange for jobs, workers were expected to give not only loyalty, but also their votes. And those votes had to be cast exactly the way Tom wanted. On election day, the streets filled with Tom's political men. Fake voters appeared, and ballot boxes were openly stuffed with fraudulent votes. Intimidation, pressure, and crushing political opponents were completely normal practices. Many people knew the entire system was corrupt, yet they remained silent. Because this corrupt political machine was also keeping their lives running. You are standing inside a city built upon clever yet shameless corruption. Here, development and crime are not enemies, they are partners. The afternoon grows even hotter as the sun seems to burn the entire city. It is nearly 3 p.m., and you move toward Union Station searching for relief from the heat. Union Station was one of the grandest landmarks in the American Midwest. The moment you pass through the massive front doors, the heat outside briefly disappears. You step into the enormous Grand Hall. A ceiling nearly 95 feet high stretches above your head. Massive bronze chandeliers hang above, each weighing nearly 3,000 pounds. The chandelier light reflects across the polished marble floors, filling the hall with royal grandeur. This was more than a train station, it was a symbol of America's industrial confidence. Every wall, arch, and design in the Beaux-Arts architecture seemed to declare power and ambition. Kansas City was not merely surviving, it was becoming stronger than ever before. The station is crowded with people, and the echoing sounds make the entire hall feel alive. More than 600,000 passengers pass through this station every year.